People like you don't belong here. The manager sneered at the teenage boy. But when he revealed his last name, the entire luxury store fell dead silent. Marcus Wilson stood at the entrance of Wilson & Co. Luxury Menswear, his worn denim jacket a stark contrast against the polished glass doors. The store's interior glowed with warm lighting that made the marble floors shine like mirrors. His hand hesitated on the door handle. "You sure about this, Dad?" Marcus had asked just yesterday, sitting across from his father in their kitchen. The morning light had caught the steam rising from James Wilson's coffee cup. "Son, that store is as much yours as it is mine now," James had said, straightening his tie. "But I meant what I said. No one there knows you're my son yet. I want you to see how it really operates." Now, standing before those gleaming doors, Marcus took a deep breath. The weight of his father's words pressed against his chest. Sometimes the best way to learn about a business is to experience it as a customer first. The door swung open smoothly, releasing a burst of cool air scented with leather and cologne. A security guard glanced up, then back down at his phone. Marcus's sneakers squeaked against the floor, a sound that seemed too loud in the hushed atmosphere. To his right, a woman in pearls examined a silk tie, while a sales associate hovered nearby, nodding enthusiastically at her every word. "Oh yes, Mrs. Bradford, that shade of azure would complement your husband's collection perfectly." Marcus moved deeper into the store, past racks of suits that probably cost more than his entire wardrobe. The fabric called to him, fine wools and cashmeres in shades of charcoal and navy. He reached out to touch a sleeve. "Can I help you find something?" The voice cut through the air like ice. Marcus turned to face Victoria Sterling, though he didn't know her name yet. She stood ramrod straight in a crisp white suit, her platinum blonde hair swept back severely from her face. Her eyes moved from his face to his jacket, then to his sneakers. "I'm just looking at the suits," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. He'd practiced this, mirror-rehearsed the kind of confidence his father carried so naturally. Victoria's lips thinned. "The youth section is in the mall down the street. This is a luxury establishment. I know what kind of store this is." Marcus turned back to the suit he'd been examining. "I'd like to try this one, please." A flicker of something, annoyance, disgust, crossed Victoria's face. Behind her, two other employees had stopped what they were doing to watch. One whispered to the other behind a manicured hand. "Young man," Victoria said, stepping closer. Her heels clicked against the marble. "This suit costs more than most cars. I think we both know Dash, that it's a Kyton K50. Marcus finished. Hand-stitched, Super 200s wool. About 40,000, if I remember right." Victoria's eyes narrowed. More customers were turning to watch now. The woman with the pearls had stopped mid-sentence, her hand frozen on the silk tie. "Who are you?" Victoria demanded, her voice rising slightly. "How did you dash?" "I read a lot," Marcus said simply. He could feel his heart pounding, but his father's words echoed in his mind. "Never let them see you sweat, son." Victoria glanced at the security guard, who had finally looked up from his phone. She turned back to Marcus, her finger raised like a weapon. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I want you out of this store. Now." Marcus stood his ground, though his palms had started to sweat. "I'm a customer. I have every right to be here." "A customer?" Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. "Let me guess, you saved up your allowance?" More people were watching now. Someone had pulled out their phone, the camera lens glinting in the carefully curated lighting. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks, but he kept his expression neutral, just like his father had taught him. "Actually," he started, but Victoria cut him off. "Security," she called, her voice echoing off the marble floors. "We have a situation." The guard began moving toward them, his shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Marcus saw movement by the door. A tall figure in a perfectly tailored suit had just entered the store. But Victoria was too focused on Marcus to notice. "People like you," she hissed, leaning close enough that Marcus could smell her expensive perfume, "don't belong here." Her hand shot out, fingers wrapping around Marcus's arm. The touch felt like a brand through his jacket. In that moment, Marcus saw something in Victoria's eyes, not just anger or suspicion, but fear. Fear of what he represented, of what his presence meant in her carefully controlled world. The tall figure by the door moved closer, but still Victoria didn't see him. She was too busy tightening her grip on Marcus's arm, too busy defending her territory against what she saw as an invasion. "I'm going to give you one last chance," she said, each word precise and sharp. "Leave now, or I'll have you removed and banned permanently." Marcus looked past her to where his father stood, watching silently. James Wilson's face was unreadable, but his eyes never left his son. This was the moment, the test, the lesson, the crossroads. Marcus took a deep breath. Time to show them exactly who he was. Victoria's fingers dug deeper into Marcus's arm. The store had fallen so quiet he could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning overhead. "I'm not leaving," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the tremor he felt in his chest. "And you're hurting my arm." Victoria jerked her hand back as if burned, but her face hardened. "Don't you dare accuse me of Dash." "I'm not accusing you of anything," Marcus interrupted. "I just want to try on a suit." A man in an expensive blazer had stopped browsing to stare openly at the scene. His wife clutched her designer purse closer, as if Marcus might snatch it at any moment. The security guard hovered uncertainly a few feet away, looking between Victoria and Marcus. "Listen here," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I've worked in luxury retail for 15 years. I know every trick, every scam. You walk in here in that jacket Dash." She gestured dismissively at his denim, pretending to know about chiton suits. Marcus squared his shoulders. "The K50 is their flagship model. Each suit takes over 50 hours to hand-stitch. The wool is sourced from merino sheep in Australia and New Zealand, specially selected for Dash. Anyone can memorize facts from the internet," Victoria snapped. She turned to the security guard. "Tom, please escort this individual out." The guard, Tom, took a hesitant step forward. "Are you sure? He hasn't actually Dash. Are you questioning my judgment?" Victoria's voice could have frozen fire. "This is clearly a case of potential theft." A young woman near the tie display had her phone up now, recording openly. Marcus could hear her whispering to her companion. "This is going straight on TikTok." "Theft," Marcus repeated, letting his genuine surprise show. "Because I want to try on a suit." "Because you're casing the store," Victoria said. Her hands were trembling slightly, though her voice remained rigid with authority. "Probably have friends waiting outside. Think we haven't seen this before." More phones were out now. Marcus could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him, could sense the mix of discomfort and curiosity from the other customers. Some looked embarrassed, others entertained, a few angry, though at whom, he couldn't tell. "Ms. Sterling," a sales associate ventured quietly. "Maybe we should Dash. Stay out of this, David," Victoria snapped. She turned back to Marcus, her lips curled in disgust. "I don't know who put you up to this, but it ends now." Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not fear anymore, but a deep, burning determination. His father had always told him that moments like these defined a person. Not the insults themselves, but how you responded to them. "Nobody put me up to anything," he said clearly, aware of the phones recording his every word. "I walked into a store, looking to buy a suit. You took one look at me and decided I didn't belong here. That says more about you than it does about me." Victoria's face flushed red. "How dare you? I am the manager of this establishment. I have a responsibility to protect Dash." "To protect what?" Marcus asked. "The merchandise? Or your assumptions about who deserves to be here?" A murmur ran through the watching crowd. Someone in the back whispered, "He's got a point." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. She glanced around, suddenly aware of their audience, of the phones recording every moment. Her carefully maintained authority was slipping. "I don't have to justify myself to you," she said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "Tom, remove him. Now." The security guard shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Sterling. Without cause Dash. Without cause." Victoria's voice rose sharply. "Is clearly not a legitimate customer. Look at him." "I'm looking," a new voice said from the crowd. "And I see a young man being judged by his jacket instead of his character." The crowd parted slightly. An elderly woman in an impeccable suit stepped forward, her silver hair styled elegantly, her bearing aristocratic. She fixed Victoria with a stern gaze. "I've been shopping here for 30 years, dear," the woman continued, "and I've never seen such a disgraceful display." Victoria's face paled. "Mrs. Rothschild, I assure you Dash." "You assure me nothing," Mrs. Rothschild cut her off. She turned to Marcus. Young man, what size suit do you wear? Before Marcus could answer, Victoria stepped between them. Mrs. Rothschild, please. You don't understand the situation. I understand perfectly, the elderly woman said coldly. I understand that you're making assumptions based on appearances. Just as people once made assumptions about me when I started my company, because surely a woman couldn't run a shipping empire. She turned back to Marcus. Now, about that suit size. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude. But before he could speak, Victoria made her fatal mistake. She reached for his arm again, her fingers closing around his jacket sleeve. This has gone far enough. I want you out of my store. Your store. The new voice came from behind them, deep and resonant with authority. James Wilson had finally stepped forward, his expensive shoes silent on the marble floor. Victoria froze, her hand still gripping Marcus's sleeve. The color drained from her face as she recognized the man standing before her, the man whose name was on the building. Marcus took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived, but somehow, he no longer felt nervous. He felt ready to teach a lesson about prejudice that Victoria Sterling would never forget. Victoria's hand fell away from Marcus's sleeve. Around them, the store had gone completely silent, every eye fixed on James Wilson's imposing figure. Mr. Wilson, Victoria stammered. I didn't expect. We weren't notified of your visit. Clearly, James said, his voice level but carrying an edge that made Victoria take a small step back. He hadn't looked at her, though. His eyes were fixed on Marcus, watching, waiting. Marcus felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His father's gaze held a question. How would he handle this? Ms. Sterling, Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. You still haven't answered my question about trying on the suit. Victoria's head whipped back and forth between Marcus and James, realization slowly dawning on her face. Her perfectly manicured hand rose to her throat. The suit? She repeated weakly. I don't understand. You're my son, James finished, but he still didn't intervene. He stood back, arms crossed, letting Marcus lead this dance. The whispers erupted around them like wildfire. Wilson's son? Oh my God, someone's getting fired. Victoria's face had gone from pale to ashen. Your son? But he didn't. Didn't what? Ms. Sterling? Marcus asked. His heart was pounding, but his voice remained calm. Didn't look like someone who could afford to shop here. Didn't match your image of what a luxury customer should be. More phones had come out. The young woman who'd mentioned TikTok earlier was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. Mrs. Rothschild stood nearby, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. I had no way of knowing, Victoria protested, her composure crumbling. You should have said something. Why? Marcus stepped closer, his sneakers squeaking on the marble floor. Would it have made a difference? Should I have to announce my father's name to be treated with basic respect? The security guard, Tom, had backed away, trying to make himself invisible. The other sales associates stood frozen, watching their manager's world implode. Of course not. Victoria's hands fluttered helplessly. We have procedures, protocols for security, like judging people by their clothes. Mrs. Rothschild interjected. My dear, I came in here wearing gardening clothes last spring. Nobody tried to throw me out. Victoria's face flushed. That was different. Why? Marcus cut in. Because you recognized her? Because she fit your idea of who belongs here. James Wilson finally moved, taking a step forward. The crowd tensed, expecting him to explode, to fire Victoria on the spot. Instead, he placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Son, he said quietly, what would you like to do here? Marcus felt the power in that question. His father wasn't just asking about the suit anymore. He was asking about Victoria, about consequences, about justice. First, Marcus said, I'd like everyone to stop recording. He turned to address the crowd. Please, this isn't about making someone go viral. It's about something more important. Slowly, reluctantly, phones lowered. Even the TikTok girl complied, though she looked disappointed. Ms. Sterling, Marcus continued, turning back to Victoria, who seemed to be physically shrinking in her white suit. I want you to understand something. When I walked in here today, I wasn't just looking for a suit. I was looking to learn about this business. My father's business, yes, but more importantly, a business that serves people. All people. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I was just trying to protect Dash. No, Marcus said firmly. You were trying to protect an image. An illusion. But real luxury isn't about excluding people. It's about excellence, quality, and service. For everyone who walks through that door. James's hand tightened on Marcus's shoulder. Pride radiated from his touch. I don't want you fired, Ms. Sterling, Marcus continued, causing Victoria's head to snap up in surprise. I want you to learn from this. I want you to do better. Can you do that? Victoria's lower lip trembled. For a moment, Marcus thought she might break down completely. But then something shifted in her expression. A realization, perhaps, or a surrender to truth. Yes, she whispered. Then, stronger, yes, I can. I will. Marcus nodded, then turned to his father. Dad, I don't think I'll be buying a suit today. James Wilson's eyebrows rose slightly. No, no. Marcus looked around the store, at the watching faces, the luxurious displays, the marble floors that had seemed so intimidating just an hour ago. I think we have more important things to focus on first. His father's smile was small but genuine. Like what? Like making sure this store lives up to its real potential. Marcus turned back to Victoria. Would you like to help with that, Ms. Sterling? Victoria stood straighter, wiping discreetly at her eyes. Yes, she said. Yes, I would. As Marcus walked out of the store with his father, he heard Mrs. Rothschild's voice behind them. Now that, my dears, is what real class looks like. The marble floors didn't squeak under his sneakers this time. Or maybe he just didn't notice anymore. The next morning, Marcus walked into Wilson & Co. again. This time, the security guard, Tom, straightened immediately, offering a respectful nod. The store hadn't opened to the public yet, but a tense energy filled the space. Victoria Sterling stood by the main counter, her white suit as impeccable as ever, but her usual confidence noticeably dimmed. The sales staff huddled nearby, stealing glances between their manager and the owner's son. Good morning, Mr. Wilson, Victoria said, her voice carefully neutral. The formal address felt strange to Marcus. Yesterday, she treated him like an intruder. Now, the power dynamic had flipped completely. Just Marcus is fine, he said, walking towards her. His sneakers still squeaked on the marble floor, but today the sound felt different. Deliberate. Can we talk? Victoria nodded stiffly. Of course. Would you prefer my office? Here's fine. Marcus gestured to the suit section where everything had unfolded yesterday. Actually, I'd like everyone to hear this. The sales associates, 5 of them in total, moved closer. David, who had tried to intervene yesterday, looked particularly anxious. First, Marcus began. I want to be clear about something. What happened yesterday wasn't just about me, was it? Victoria's shoulders tensed. I don't understand, Dash. Yes, you do, Marcus interrupted, but kept his tone gentle. How many other people have you turned away? How many others didn't happen to be the owner's son? The silence that followed was heavy. One of the sales associates, a young woman named Sarah according to her name tag, shifted uncomfortably. We've had incidents, Victoria finally admitted. Shoplifting attempts, vandalism dash. And were those attempts by people who looked like me? Marcus asked directly. Victoria's face flushed. That's not. I mean, it's okay to say it, Marcus pressed. We need to be honest here. Some were, Victoria said quietly. But not all. Not even most. Yet that's where your mind went when you saw me. David stepped forward. If I may, we've all done it. Made assumptions. I mean, it's not right, but it's easier, Marcus finished. Easier than treating each person as an individual. Easier than questioning our own biases. The morning sun streamed through the store's windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. A cleaning crew worked silently in the background, preparing for another day of business. Yesterday, Marcus continued, I could have had you fired, Ms. Sterling. My father left that decision to me. Do you know why I chose not to? Victoria shook her head slightly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Because firing you wouldn't solve the real problem. It wouldn't change the attitudes, the assumptions, The unspoken rules about who belongs here and who doesn't. Marcus walked over to the chiton suit he'd tried to look at yesterday. He ran his hand along the sleeve, feeling the exceptional fabric. This store sells luxury goods, yes. But luxury shouldn't mean exclusivity based on appearance. It should mean excellence in product and service, for everyone who walks through that door. Sarah raised her hand tentatively, like a student in class. But how do we? I mean, security is still important, right? Absolutely, Marcus agreed. But security comes from training, awareness, and actual behavior, not prejudice. Tell me, what are the real signs of a potential shoplifter? The staff looked at each other uncertainly. Body language. Tom the security guard spoke up from his position near the door. Specific behaviors like avoiding eye contact, checking for cameras, concealing hands. Not skin color or clothes. Exactly, Marcus said. Yesterday, I walked in here confidently, made direct eye contact, and openly expressed interest in merchandise. Yet you, he looked at Victoria, saw a threat. Why? Victoria's professional mask cracked slightly. Because I was wrong, she whispered. Because I let my prejudices override my training, my experience, everything I should know better about. And that's why I'm here this morning, Marcus said. Not to punish or shame anyone, but to start making changes. Real changes. He turned to address the entire staff. My father built this business on quality and service. He believed that true luxury should be accessible to anyone willing to invest in it. But somewhere along the way, that vision got distorted. We started selling exclusivity instead of excellence. The sales associates were nodding now, engaged rather than afraid. So here's what we're going to do, Marcus continued. Starting today, we're implementing new training programs. Real ones, focused on recognizing and addressing bias. We're going to rewrite our service protocols. And most importantly, we're going to change the culture of this store. Victoria stepped forward, her spine straightening. I'd like to lead that initiative, if you'll allow it. Marcus studied her carefully. Why? Because I need to fix what I broke, she said firmly. Not just yesterday's incident, but years of perpetuating these biases. I know this business. I know luxury retail. Let me use that knowledge to make real change. For a moment, Marcus said nothing. The silence stretched until Victoria added, Soften now, please. Let me make this right. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, but you'll work directly with me on this. And MS. Sterling. Yes. The next time you see someone in here who doesn't fit your idea of a luxury customer, remember yesterday. Remember how wrong those assumptions can be. Victoria's yes, sir was quiet but sincere. As the staff dispersed to prepare for opening, Marcus caught a glimpse of his father standing in the doorway of the store. James Wilson's face showed nothing but pride as he watched his son reshape the future of their business, one prejudice at a time. The store opened its doors at precisely 10 a.m. Victoria stood at her usual post near the entrance, but her usual commanding presence had been replaced by something more thoughtful, more aware. Marcus sat in what had been his father's office, now temporarily serving as a command center for their new initiative. Papers covered the mahogany desk, employee training manuals, security protocols, customer service guidelines. Each document needed to be reviewed, revised, rewritten. A knock on the door interrupted his concentration. Come in. David, the sales associate who had tried to intervene yesterday, stepped inside. Sir, there's something you should see. Marcus followed him to the sales floor. A small crowd had gathered around a display of ties, all focused on something on their phones. The whispers reached him before he got there. That's him. From yesterday. 3 million views already. Someone had posted the video. Despite Marcus's request, despite his attempt to handle things privately, the confrontation had gone viral. Victoria appeared at his side, her face tight with anxiety. I've already seen it on 4 different platforms. The comments, they are not kind to me. Marcus watched over someone's shoulder as the scene played out on a tiny screen. The moment looked different from the outside. More dramatic, more staged almost. Comments scrolled past. Karen gets owned. Rich kid teaches racist manager a lesson. This is what privilege looks like. This isn't what I wanted, Marcus said quietly. But maybe it's what needed to happen, a familiar voice responded. Mrs. Rothschild stood behind them, elegant as ever in a navy pantsuit. Sometimes the truth needs a wider audience. Victoria looked like she might be sick. The corporate office has been calling all morning. The press wants statements. Twitter is not kind. Marcus straightened his shoulders. Then we control the narrative. He walked to the center of the store and cleared his throat. The customers looked up from their phones, recognition flashing across their faces. Yes, that's me in the video, he said clearly. And yes, that happened here yesterday. But what you're not seeing in that viral clip is what happened this morning. Phones came up again, recording his words. This morning, we started making real changes. Not because of public pressure or viral videos, but because it's the right thing to do. MS. Sterling. Victoria stepped forward, visibly trembling but holding her head high. I was wrong, she said, her voice carrying across the now silent store. Not just yesterday, but in the assumptions I've made throughout my career. And I'm not just apologizing, I'm committing to change. A customer in expensive loungewear scoffed. Pretty convenient now that you've been exposed. No, Marcus cut in. She could have resigned. She could have hidden behind corporate statements. Instead, she's choosing to stay and do the hard work of making real change. The crowd murmured. Someone typed rapidly on their phone, probably live-tweeting the moment. The easy thing, Marcus continued, would be to fire her, make a public statement about zero tolerance, and move on. But that wouldn't solve the real problem. The problem isn't one person or one incident. It's a system that needs to change. Mrs. Rothschild stepped forward. I've been shopping here for decades, she announced to the crowd. And I've seen how this place operates. What this young man is doing, what they are both doing, takes real courage. Victoria wiped a tear from her cheek, trying to maintain her professional composure. I've spent the morning reading every comment, every post. They write about what I did, but they don't know what happens next. What does happen next? Someone called from the crowd. Marcus smiled. Watch and see. Starting today, Wilson & Co. isn't just selling luxury goods. We're setting a new standard for how business should be done, how people should be treated. All people. He turned to Victoria. Ready to show them? She nodded, squaring her shoulders. More than ready. Together, they walked to the front of the store. Victoria pulled out a piece of paper, the first draft of their new customer service protocol. Every customer who enters this store will be treated with respect, dignity, and professional courtesy, she read. No exceptions, no assumptions, no prejudices. That's just words, someone muttered. You're right, Marcus agreed. Which is why we're backing it up with action. Starting today, every employee undergoes new training. We're establishing a customer feedback system. We're creating a community advisory board to help us identify and address bias. Victoria took over. We're also implementing a mentorship program, partnering with local schools to introduce young people to the business world. Not just sales, everything from fashion design to business management. The crowd had grown. More phones recorded, more people typed. But this time, the story wasn't about conflict. It was about change. A young black woman near the back raised her hand. Are you hiring? Victoria looked at Marcus, who nodded. We are, she said. And we're looking for people who share our new vision. New vision? Same old store, someone else asked skeptically. No, Marcus said firmly. New vision, new store, new standards. The luxury industry has hidden behind exclusivity for too long. We're going to prove that excellence and inclusivity can coexist. He caught his father's eye across the store. James Wilson stood in the doorway of his office, watching his son transform their family business into something bigger than they'd imagined. The phones kept recording, the story kept spreading. But now it wasn't just about yesterday's confrontation. It was about today's transformation, tomorrow's possibility. It was about change. Late afternoon sun slanted through the store's windows, turning the marble floors golden. The initial crowd had dispersed, but the energy in the store remained charged with possibility. Marcus sat in the break room, reviewing applications from the impromptu job fair that had sprouted after his speech. Beside him, Victoria sorted through customer feedback forms, a new initiative they'd implemented on the spot. Listen to this one, Victoria said, holding up a paper. I've been shopping here for 20 years, but today was the first time I felt like I was part of something more than a transaction. Her voice caught slightly. They're giving us a chance. Not everyone is, Marcus replied, sliding his phone across the table. The screen showed a business news website. Wilson and CO. Publicity stunt or real change. Victoria's face fell. They think we're just doing damage control. Some do. Marcus picked up another application. But look at this. Sarah Chen, recent business graduate, writes that she wants to be part of rebuilding luxury retail from the ground up. That's what matters. A knock on the break room door interrupted them. David poked his head in. Sorry to disturb you, but there's someone here you both need to meet. They followed David to the sales floor, where a man in an impeccable suit stood examining a display. He turned as they approached, and Victoria's breath caught. Bernard Lambert, CEO of their biggest competitor. Mr. Lambert, Victoria said, automatically straightening her posture. What a surprise. Bernard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Indeed, I thought I should see for myself what all the excitement is about. He turned to Marcus. You've caused quite a stir, young man. That wasn't my intention, Marcus replied evenly. No. Bernard raised an eyebrow. 3 million views suggest otherwise. Quite the marketing strategy. Manufacture a controversy, ride the viral wave, position yourselves as champions of change. Victoria stepped forward. That's not what -MS. Sterling, Bernard cut her off. I've known you for years. You're a professional. Surely you see how this performance damages our entire industry. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest, but kept his voice calm. How exactly does treating people with respect damage the industry? Luxury is about exclusivity, Bernard said, as if explaining something to a child. It's about maintaining standards, preserving an experience that our clientele expects. You mean preserving prejudice, Marcus countered. Bernard's smile tightened. I mean preserving distinction. Once you open the floodgates, Once you open the floodgates. What? James Wilson's voice rang out. He walked towards them, every inch the business tightened. Once you treat everyone with dignity, the luxury somehow disappears. James, Bernard said smoothly, you can't tell me you support this social experiment? Your son is young, idealistic My son, James interrupted, is right. He moved to stand beside Marcus. And if you're here to defend discrimination in the name of distinction, you can leave my store. Bernard's facade cracked slightly. The board won't like this, James. Your shareholders will see that ethical business is good business, Marcus cut in. We've had more foot traffic today than any day last month. Our social media engagement is up 500%. And more importantly, we're doing what's right. Victoria stepped forward. Mr. Lambert, I used to think like you. I thought I was protecting something valuable, but I was just protecting my own prejudices. Pretty words, Bernard sneered. Let's see how they translate to quarterly earnings. Let's, James agreed, because I'm betting that customers, all customers, would rather shop somewhere they are respected than somewhere they are prejudged. Bernard looked around the store, at the diverse mix of customers browsing freely, at the new energy in the space. His lip curled slightly. You're making a mistake, he said finally. This isn't how our business works. No, Marcus replied. This is how business should work. And we're going to prove it. After Bernard left, Victoria let out a shaky breath. He'll try to hurt us. He has influence with suppliers, other retailers. Let him try, James said firmly. We've weathered worse. Marcus watched a young couple enter the store, clearly nervous, clearly not typical luxury shoppers. David approached them with a genuine smile, making them feel welcome. Dad, Marcus said quietly, what if Bernard's right? What if we lose business? James put a hand on his son's shoulder. Then we lose the wrong kind of business. But look around. I think we're about to gain something much more valuable. Victoria straightened her suit jacket. I should get back to those training protocols. We'll need them more than ever now. As she walked away, Marcus noticed her step was lighter, her head held higher. She wasn't just following orders anymore. She believed in what they were doing. The afternoon sun continued its journey across the marble floors, illuminating not just the luxury goods, but the people who sold them, bought them, dreamed of them. Each person who walked through the door brought their own story, their own worth. And for the first time, those stories were being heard. A week had passed since the incident. The viral video had been watched over 10 million times now, spawning countless reaction videos, think pieces, and social media debates. But inside Wilson & Co., real change was taking root. Marcus stood at the front of the store's back office, now converted into a temporary training room. 20 employees sat before him, including Victoria, who had insisted on going through the new training program herself. "Let's start with a simple exercise," Marcus said, writing on the whiteboard. "What's the first thing you notice about a customer when they walk in?" The room fell silent. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. "Be honest," Marcus encouraged. "We're here to learn, not judge." Sarah, the young sales associate, raised her hand. "Their clothes," she admitted. "I always look at what they are wearing first." "Their confidence level," David added. "You can tell a lot by how they carry themselves." Victoria sat straight in her chair, her hands folded in her lap. "Their race," she said quietly. "We might as well be honest about it. That's often the first thing we notice, even if we don't want to admit it." Marcus nodded, writing each response on the board. "And what assumptions do we make based on these observations?" "That expensive clothes mean they can afford to shop here," someone called out. "That nervous people might be up to something," another added. "That some people don't belong," Victoria finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus put down the marker and turned to face the group. "Now, let me tell you about some customers you might have judged wrong." He pointed to a photo on the wall, a newspaper clipping about a local tech entrepreneur. "This woman came in last year wearing sweatpants and running shoes. 3 different stores turned her away. She ended up buying her office furniture from our competitor. A $500,000 order." The staff murmured uncomfortably. "Or this man," Marcus continued, pointing to another photo. "Drives a 15-year-old car, wears the same jacket every day. Is also one of the city's biggest real estate developers. But he values modesty over flash." Victoria raised her hand. "I remember him. I wasn't very welcoming." "The point isn't to shame anyone," Marcus said. "The point is that we can't know someone's story, their worth, or their potential just by looking at them. And more importantly, we shouldn't have to." He walked to the center of the room. "Our job isn't to judge who belongs here. Our job is to provide excellent service to everyone who walks through that door. Period." A new employee, hired just days ago, raised her hand. "But what about security? We can't just ignore potential threats." "Good question," Marcus nodded. "Tom." The security guard stood up from his corner seat. "Real security isn't about profiling. It's about behavior patterns, specific actions, documented concerns. In 15 years on the job, I've never stopped a theft by judging someone's appearance. I've stopped them by watching what people do, not what they look like." Victoria stood up suddenly. "May I say something?" Marcus gestured for her to take the floor. She turned to face her colleagues, her usual confidence tempered by humility. "A week ago, I thought I was protecting this store. I thought my judgment, my prejudices were keeping us safe, maintaining our standards. I was wrong, and it took being completely wrong about the owner's son to make me see it." She took a deep breath. "But here's what I've learned this week. True luxury isn't about keeping people out. It's about bringing excellence to everyone who wants it. And yes, that means changing how we think, how we act, how we judge. It's hard. I still catch myself making assumptions. But every time I do, I remember that day, and I choose differently." The room was silent, absorbing her words. Marcus stepped forward. "That's why we're here. Not because of a viral video or public pressure, but because we choose to be better. Now, let's talk about specific scenarios." The training continued through the afternoon. They role-played difficult situations, discussed unconscious bias, practiced new approaches to customer service. But more importantly, they talked openly about the assumptions they'd made, the prejudices they'd held, the changes they needed to make. Near the end of the session, James Wilson stopped by. He stood in the doorway, watching his son lead the discussion with natural authority and genuine compassion. "Questions?" Marcus asked as they wrapped up. An older sales associate raised his hand. "What if we make mistakes? What if we slip up? Then we acknowledge it, learn from it, and do better next time," Marcus replied. "This isn't about being perfect. It's about being better than we were yesterday." As the staff filed out, Victoria lingered behind. "Marcus." "Yes. Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for giving me a second chance, but for showing me why I needed one." Marcus watched her leave, then turned to his father. "How'd I do?" James smiled. You didn't just teach them about customer service today. You taught them about humanity. Outside, the store hummed with activity. New customers mixed with old ones, each treated with the same respect, the same service, the same dignity. The change wasn't just in policies or procedures, it was in the air itself, in the way people carried themselves, in the way they saw each other. One teaching moment had sparked a transformation, not just of a store, but of hearts and minds. 1 month after the incident, Marcus stood in front of the Kyton K50 suit that had started it all. The price tag hadn't changed, but everything else had. Still thinking about it? Victoria asked, approaching with a stack of reports in her hands. She looked different now, still professional, but softer somehow, more approachable. Actually, I am, Marcus replied, running his hand along the sleeve. But not for the reasons you might think. The store had transformed over the past month. The marble floors still gleamed, the luxury goods still carried their premium price tags, but the atmosphere had shifted. Customers of all backgrounds browsed freely, assisted by a notably more diverse staff. Our numbers came in, Victoria said, holding up the reports. Would you like to see them? Marcus nodded, following her to a nearby counter. She spread out the papers, pointing to key figures. Foot traffic up 40%. Sales up 25%. Customer satisfaction ratings at an all-time high. She paused, tapping another number. And 0 reported incidents of discrimination or bias complaints. Bernard Lambert said we'd destroy the business, Marcus mused. Looks like we did the opposite. Mr. Wilson. A new voice interrupted them. They turned to see a young man in worn jeans and a clean but obviously old dress shirt. I'm Josh. I'm here for the internship program. Victoria smiled warmly. Of course. Let me get your paperwork. As she walked away, Marcus studied Josh, nervous, hopeful, clearly not from a privileged background. A month ago, he might not have made it past the door. Is it true? Josh asked suddenly. The story about what happened here? The video. It's true, Marcus nodded. But it's not the whole story. The real story is what happened after. Josh glanced around the store. I never thought I could work in a place like this. Never thought I'd be welcome. Things change, Marcus said. Sometimes they have to be forced to change. But once they do, he gestured to the bustling store floor, where customers of all types were being served with equal attention and respect. Victoria returned with the paperwork, and Josh followed her to her office. As they walked away, Marcus heard him ask, "Is that really the suit from the video?" Marcus turned back to the K50. Its presence had become almost symbolic now, a reminder of where they'd been, and how far they'd come. You still haven't bought it. His father's voice came from behind him. No, Marcus agreed. I haven't. James Wilson stood beside his son, both of them reflected in the store's polished mirrors. May I ask why? Because it's not about the suit anymore, Marcus said. It never really was. A group of teenagers walked past, whispering and pointing at the suit. One of them pulled out his phone, probably to take a picture of the now-famous garment. You know, James said, some might say you've taken all the exclusivity out of luxury retail. Marcus watched as David, now promoted to floor manager, greeted the teenagers with genuine warmth, offering to tell them about the suit's craftsmanship. No, Marcus replied. We just redefined what exclusivity means. It's not about excluding people. It's about exclusive quality, exclusive service, exclusive attention to every customer who walks through that door. Victoria emerged from her office, showing Josh around the store. The young man's eyes were wide with possibility. Your mother would be proud, James said quietly. She always said this business needed a heart. Marcus thought about his mother, gone 5 years now, but still influencing every decision. She'd been the one who insisted on treating their household staff like family, who taught Marcus that true worth had nothing to do with wealth. Mr. Wilson. It was Sarah, one of their new sales associates. There's a customer asking about the internship program. She says she saw the video and wanted to know if we're still accepting applications. Marcus smiled. We're always accepting applications, Sarah, from anyone who wants to be part of what we're building here. As Sarah walked away, James turned to his son. You never did tell me. What made you decide not to buy the suit that day? Marcus watched Josh trying on a suit jacket, Victoria adjusting the shoulders with professional care. He saw Mrs. Rothschild chatting with a young woman in streetwear about investment dressing. He noticed Tom, the security guard, giving directions to a family that would have made him nervous a month ago. Because buying the suit would have been about proving a point, Marcus said finally. And we ended up proving something much more important. James nodded, understanding in his eyes. And what was that? That change is possible. That people can learn, grow, become better. That luxury isn't about keeping people out, it's about lifting people up. The afternoon sun painted the store in warm light, catching the metal hangers and glass displays. But it wasn't the merchandise that shone brightest. It was the people, all of them. Each one welcome, each one valued. Marcus straightened his denim jacket, the same one he'd worn that first day. Come on, Dad. We've got work to do. Together, they walked away from the K50 suit, leaving it as a testament to the day everything changed, not just for a store, but for an industry, a community, and most importantly, for the people within it. 6 months after the viral video, Marcus sat in what was now his office at Wilson & Co. The wall behind his desk displayed framed articles. Luxury retail's new face, Wilson & Co. leads industry change. How one moment transformed a business. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Victoria entered, followed by a young woman in a hijab. Marcus, this is Amira, our newest management trainee. Welcome to Wilson & Co., Marcus said, standing to shake her hand. How's your first day going? Honestly, Amira smiled. Nothing like I expected. When I applied, I thought, well, I've had bad experiences in luxury retail before. We all have, Victoria said quietly. On both sides of the counter. She turned to Marcus. Amira graduated top of her class in business. 3 other retailers turned her down. Their loss, Marcus replied. We're glad to have you, Amira. After they left, Marcus walked the store floor. The changes were subtle but significant. The security cameras were still there, but they were supplemented by better lighting and open sight lines. The merchandise was still exclusive, but the atmosphere was inclusive. Mr. Wilson, a familiar voice called out. He turned to see Josh, now in a well-fitted suit, helping a customer. Could you come here for a moment? The customer was a teenage boy, maybe 15, wearing a denim jacket not unlike the one Marcus had worn that fateful day. He looked nervous, out of place. This is Marcus Wilson, Josh said to the boy. He can tell you about our youth mentorship program. Marcus saw himself in the boy's anxious stance, his uncertain eyes. Looking for a suit? I have a scholarship interview, the boy said. But I can't. Let me tell you a story, Marcus said, leading him to a particular spot on the floor. Right here, 6 months ago, I stood in a denim jacket just like yours. And someone told me I didn't belong. The boy's eyes widened with recognition. The video? That was you. It was. But that's not the important part of the story. The important part is what happened next. As Marcus spoke, he noticed other customers listening in. Some had their phones out, but not to record. They were pulling up the old viral video, showing it to their companions, whispering about being in the exact spot where it happened. The suit you're looking at, Marcus continued. It's not just fabric and thread. It's confidence, possibility, a chance to show the world who you really are, not who they think you are. Victoria appeared with a garment bag. I took the liberty of pulling some options in your size, she told the boy. Would you like to try them on? The boy nodded, following Victoria to the fitting rooms. As they walked away, Marcus heard him ask, Is it true that you're different now? That everyone's welcome here? See for yourself, Victoria replied. And then help us spread the word. James Wilson appeared at his son's side, still giving impromptu speeches. Someone once taught me that every moment is a teaching moment, Marcus smiled. They watched as a diverse stream of customers moved through the store. Mrs. Rothschild was there, showing a group of fashion students the finer points of fabric quality. Tom the security guard chatted easily with everyone, his eyes alert but his manner warm. David managed the floor with quiet efficiency, ensuring every customer received the same high level of service. The board meeting's tomorrow, James said. They'll want to know if all this change was worth it. Marcus pulled out his phone, showing his father the latest numbers. Sales were up 50% year over year. Customer satisfaction was at record levels. Employee retention had never been higher. But that's not the real measure, is it? James asked. No, Marcus agreed. Watching as the boy emerged from the fitting room in a perfectly tailored suit, his entire bearing transformed. Victoria adjusted his collar with professional pride while Josh offered enthusiastic encouragement. The real measure is in moments like that, Marcus said. In changed lives, changed attitudes, changed futures. The famous K50 suit still hung in its place of honor, but it was no longer just a symbol of luxury. It had become a symbol of transformation, not just of a store or an industry, but of the very idea of what it means to belong. A young sales associate approached Marcus. "Sir, there's a reporter here from the Business Journal. They want to do a follow-up story on our 6-month anniversary." Marcus looked at his father. "Want to handle this one?" James shook his head. "This is your story now, son. Your vision. Your legacy." As Marcus walked toward the waiting reporter, he passed the spot where everything had changed. The marble floor still gleamed, but it no longer squeaked under his shoes. He'd learned to walk with confidence, not just in luxury stores, but in life. The reporter stood ready with her notebook. "Mr. Wilson, 6 months ago, a viral video transformed your business. What's the most important lesson you've learned?" Marcus glanced around the store, at Victoria training Amira, at Josh helping the boy in his new suit, at the diverse mix of customers and staff moving through the space with equal dignity and purpose. "The most important lesson," he repeated, "that true luxury isn't about keeping people out. It's about welcoming them in. It's about creating a space where everyone can discover their own worth, their own potential, their own place in the world." The reporter scribbled quickly. "And what's next for Wilson & Co.?" Marcus smiled. This was never just about one store. It was about setting a new standard, showing what's possible when you choose inclusion over exclusion, dignity over discrimination, change over comfort. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows through the store's windows. But inside Wilson & Co., a new day was just beginning, not just for a luxury retailer, but for everyone who walked through its doors, carrying their own dreams, their own stories, their own possibilities. And every single one of them belonged.